So we're looking at the Gemara on Daf Ayin Beis. Omar Rava, my time of the Machteres. This is where we began at the end of last week. Why did the Torah say that if a person comes into a Machteres and you kill him, then you're not responsible as a murderer? Ein lo damin. It's as if he's a dead person. You're allowed to kill him. I think the underlying question here is that he's only coming to steal. He's a burglar. He doesn't deserve misa for gneva. Chazaka eno de mamid atzmo al mamono. It's clear that a person will protect his possessions. He's not going to stand by passively while somebody cleans out all his possessions. And the Ganav realizes this. Vahai, and this Ganav, Meimar Omar, he'll say to himself before he comes into the house, Ia Zilna, if I'm going to go and steal, and the Baal Bais will know about it, he'll sense that I'm there, is for sure Kai Liape, he's going to stand against me. Philosophically, he's not going to just sit by idly. And he Kai Liape Katilale. And if he'll stand against me, I'm going to kill him in order to achieve my goal and take his possessions, steal his possessions. But Torah Omer, now the Torah understood this whole psychology and the fact that the Bava Machteres is coming in with the mindset of killing, if need be, the Baal Bayis. So he takes with him all his ammunition. And at Torah Omer, the Torah is declared in Baal Lahargecha Hashkim Lahargecha. If the Ganav is coming into the house, burglarizing the house with the mindset that he'll, if need be, kill the Baal Bayis, if the Baal Bayis stands against him, then Hashkem Lahargo, you're allowed to be mocked him and kill him before he kills you. Okay. Now, if you recall, we mentioned that the Ran seems to have a slightly different approach here. And the Ran puts all the emphasis on the initiative that's going to be taken by the Baal Bayis to protect his property. And the Ran goes on to say that based on a Gemara that we didn't get to yet, this halacha of taking the law into your own hands as the Baal Bayis, and if need be, killing the burglar, is applicable both on Shabbos and on Chol. That's called Ein lo domim bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos. Now, we had a problem here because we saw in the Gemara of Rava that the burglar is called Bala Hargecha. Bala Hargecha is called in the halacha a rodek. And certainly, once we establish that a person, meaning the owner of the house, is going to protect his possessions, and the Ganav nevertheless is breaking into his house, the Ganav therefore has a status of a rodek, because the Ganav is going to kill you, if you prevent him from successfully burglarizing your house. So therefore, what difference to make whether it's Shabbos or Chol? That was the problem that we raised. And we added another element to the equation here in order to perhaps explain the chiddush of Bein b'Shabbos, Bein b'chol Bein b'Shabbos, that when we say that Chazok eino l'mamid atzmo al mamono, the words of Rava, it's not just a psychological analysis of the situation. It's not just that we are very astute psychologist, and we know that he's going to go ahead as a Baal Bayis and protect himself. It's more than that. It's that he has the rights to protect himself. That's his chus. Now, if it's his chus on the part of the Baal Bayis, when does that chus apply? Meaning, in this kind of light, a new light that was shedding on the parsha of the Bob Makpelis, that he knows to prepare for a confrontation, a life or death duel, if it's based not on a psychological reality that we can predict that the Baal Bayis will in fact confront the burglar, etc., etc., but rather it's built on the Baal Bayis' chus. Could it be possible that that chus, that right that the Torah recognizes, that grants the Baal Bayis to be omed al mamono, to protect his own possessions, only applies on a weekday and not on a Shabbos? Because ultimately, if everything he is built on, or a result of the schus that a person has to be omed al mamono, then does that schus go as far as to override the Shabbos? You know, we would not override the Shabbos for a financial loss. I mean, the Gemara has cases where there's a fire that broke out, and adam bohul al mamono, and they allowed violations of rabbinic prohibitions, but to violate the Shabbos for the sake of saving money, that we don't recognize. The halacha doesn't have that. And in that context, perhaps if the entire parsha of Bava Machteres is predicated on the rights of the Baal Bayis to protect his possessions, and that's a schus that the Torah is granting him, then in the event that that schus will ultimately lead to the violation of Shabbos, then you're really, in a sense, balancing and weighing the right of a person to save his mammon versus the violation of desecration of Shabbos. And therefore, we can justify the Hamamin, at least, that maybe the whole parsha of Bava Machteres only applies on a weekday. So what's the bottom line? Why does it apply on Shabbos? And I would think that maybe there are two ways of going here. One way is to say that that schus that you have applies even on Shabbos, even if it'll ultimately mean that somebody's going to get killed and violate the Shabbos. Or maybe the maskana is that this is not based on a schus, but the entire parsha of Rodef with regard to the Bava Machteres is predicated on a mitzias, on that psychological analysis that we spoke about, that was certain that a person will not just stand by idly, he will have, an aggressive desire to actively protect his mammon, and that's going to lead to the burglar becoming a Rodef. That's going to happen even on Shabbos, no less than on the week. All right, let's go on in the Gemara. Omar Ra. Haba b'machteres. Right, he breaks into his friend's house. V'natal kelim. Now, there are two possibilities. One possibility is that the Bava Machteres breaks these kelim while he's in the Machteres. As he's breaking into the fellow Jew's house. And as he's in the house, he breaks kelim. The other possibility is that he takes the kelim out of the house and then he breaks the kelim. So Rav says, not al kelim v'yatza. If he took the kelim out of the house, potter, he doesn't have to return the kelim. It's a pella of a chidush. My timer b'dom koninu. There's some new halacha here that the Ganav, the Bob Machteres, has acquired ownership. He made a kinyan on the Balabai's kelim because of Damin, because he is no longer alive in the sense that if somebody kills him, they're not chayv. So through this Damin, which means that hutar damo, as long as he's in the Machteres, he makes a kinyan on the kelim, and the Baal Bais has no recourse to sue him to return those kelim. So normally we say that a Ganav who steals something has very limited kinyan on the object he stole. The Torah says, obviously it's not yours, you have to return it to its rightful owner. And that's explicit in the Torah. But that whole structure is based on the fact that the object is owned by the Nignav and not by the Ganav. If I could turn things around and through the act of Gineva, the Ganav actually acquires ownership over the object, then he doesn't have to return it. And Rav introduces a new kind of kinyan that only applies to Bava Machteres, of B'damim Konin. He acquires ownership over the Nignav's object through B'damim, through Damim. Now, if I want to take the easy way out here, and sometimes it pays to take the easy way out, I would say, according to Rav, that fundamentally, in principle, a Ganav actually does acquire ownership on the object that he stole. The only reason he has to return it is because the Torah says, we're not going to let you get away with it. The Heshav is like Gzeila Shel Gaza. You must return the Gzeila. This is like a punishment that we're imposing on the Ganav. And why do I call that the easy way out? Because then we could apply the principle of Kim Leib the Ramlinin, that we don't apply two onshim. So the chiyuv of an onesh of returning the stolen goods, which was meant to be incurred at the moment that he stole the object, that chiyuv doesn't emerge, because the chiyuv onesh now is ein lo damid, that he can be killed. And this really touches on the issue of the relationship between chiyuve ganav and chiyuve mazik. A mazik is responsible for destroying someone else's objects, and therefore, out of a punitive liability for responsibility for destroying someone else's object, we're going to apply the principle of Kim Levi the Rami. Now, we're going to say, well, a rodev, or someone who's chayav misa at that time, is not going to incur chiyuv damages of tashlumei nezikin, because that would be imposing on him a second punishment, which we don't do. And if we could make that bridge or that analogy between a mazik and a ganav, then we could say the same thing by a ganav, that his obligation with regard to that object is punitive. It's an onesh. And since he incurred that chiyuv onesh at the time that he was a rodev, while he was in the Machteres, So we're going to apply the principle of Kimlei to the Rabbi. And we can't give him 2 onship, we can only give him the more severe onship.
But in this case, I mean, you're not obligated to kill him, right? You're off the hook if you do.
Well, that's an issue that I'm not sure we're ready for yet, Steve, but when the Torah talks about a rodef, is the Torah just saying, you know what, you're not responsible if you kill him, or is the Torah saying kill the rodef? Again, we're only going to kill the rodef when the other option is that the nirdaf's life is endangered. If, let's say, we can do away with the rodef by shooting for the legs and still save and guarantee the survival of the nirdaf, that's something else. But this burglar has, we're talking about like a face-to-face confrontation. He is now a rodef. And the Torah gave him a death sentence, but we cannot add another sentence, namely a monetary expense. That's if I see the Heshiv Sagzel Shal Gazal, the obligation to return, as a kind of a punitive halacha, that's an onesh. And then we could say, well, in 2 onshim, we only take the more severe onesh, and that's Kimlei B'Rabmi. But even though I agree that that's a valid approach to this Gemara of Rav, I hesitate because I think it's a little bit of the easy way out. And if you look at Rav, he doesn't mention Kimlei B'Rabmi. He doesn't whisper a word about Kimlei B'Rabmi. All he says is B'domim Knaninu. There's like a kinyan and domim here. That the chiyuv of a Heshiv Sagzel Shal Gazal is suspended here. And the Ganav doesn't have to return it because it's his, because it actually belongs to him. Again, if I'm going with a very literal approach to translate the words of Rav, B'domim koninu. Koninu means he acquired ownership. So there's no Beishav Sagzela. Beishav Sagzela applies when I have to give you back that which is yours. But if I already acquired ownership on it, then I don't have to give it back to you. And now Rav is saying you acquired ownership as a Bob Machperes, as a rodef, because of so wait a minute. So let me finish that sentence. So why did you acquire ownership? B'domim koninu. That's why I say it's a lot easier to go and Kimlei B'Rabmi. The other approach is more honest to the text and the statement of Rav, but conceptually, why does the domim effectuate a new kinyan if it's not Kimlei B'Rabmi? So I want to read to you the words of the Ran once again. The Ran says, Svir Leila Rav. Rav is of the opinion the chihechi de imshiber asakelim b'machtaris potur ve'eno de mesu mishalim ochinami notal sakelim v'olichan lebeso ve'heim bebeso potur. V'hainu de ka'omar b'domi koninu. Klomar sheba'es shenitolam zacha b'hen v'nischai b'nafsho v'poter mitashlum li olam shemisha mishas gineva zacha b'hen. So again, I can't tell you exactly how this, the mechanics of how this works, but I can tell you that the Ran is really reading these words b'domim koninu very, very carefully, very literally. Shebishas gineva zacha b'hem. It's not just that we can't punish him. That's just a negative. We don't, our arms, our ability to implement the punishment is restricted here. No. He's saying something else. He's saying B'shas Kineva Zachabain. There's a positive element of Zachir, and that's what it says in the Gemara. I can't hold the Ran responsible for that.
I mean, at that point in time, we've already, even though it's going to happen in the future, the point would be is that we would kill him. So therefore, he's already dead. He can't be kona anything, right?
So you're making the question even more severe. We're saying here, according to Rav, that at that moment that we can knock him off, he's a rodev, that at that moment, he has the ability to make a kinyan on whatever diamonds or whatever he's stealing. And he acquires it in such a way that he doesn't have to return it. Even when he gets out of the makter, he's no longer a rodev. How does he acquire ownership over someone else's diamonds just because we could knock him off? Just because at that moment in time, he was, so to speak, a dead man. On the contrary, what you're saying is the opposite, that a dead man cannot acquire ownership in anything. He's already dead. And he says, that if not al kalim v'olichon lebeso, v'heim bebeso, we know exactly where these kalim are. Potter. Shebe'esha netolon, at that moment he took the kalim, zacha b'hem. V'nischai b'nafsho, u'potter v'tashlum li olam. Again, Rav is going to disagree with this, but I'm just trying to understand Ra, All right, let's read Rav. Let's read Rav. Omar Rav, Mistabra Milsa de Rav, I can accept the exemption of the Baba Machteres from payment with regard to Nezikin, if he destroyed the Kalim. Mishashibe, the less than, because the Kalim are not in the world. He broke them. That's irreversible. And now we want to sue him for damages and let him pay the value of the object that was broken. Okay, so at the moment that he stole it and he was chayav misa, he will not at the same moment generate a chiyuv tashlumin. Because again, the chiyuv tashlumin is engendered at the time that he broke the kalim, which was when he was in the machteres, aval natal. But if he took out the kalim, then the kalim is still alive when he got out of the machteres. Lo, I'm not going to agree with the logic that he should be potter. He says here, Rashi, Aval Notal lo mistavra behod milsa de Rav de Potter, but the came of the Kayomim kol hecha de isnu de Marayu ninu. The Ein Zachiv Tashlumin The object of the owner, of the rightful owner, is in his possession. So we got to get it back to the owner. It's not like the case where it broke and it doesn't exist anymore. Where he's chayv tashlumin, and you can say, all right, we can't impose a chayv tashlumin on him because at that moment he was chayv misa. Okay. But if he's holding on to the fellow's vase, very expensive vase, then we're not talking about a chiyuv tashlumin. He's just returning to the owner that which the owner owns. It's not some sort of chiyuv tashlumin. So that's Rashi. And getting back to the Ran again, I accept the logic of Rav, Bishashiber. Chlomar, Sheshavron Haganov B'Macheres. Hain B'Shogig, Hain B'Mezi. Doesn't matter if he dropped the kli inadvertently, unintentionally, it fell and smashed, or he actually physically, deliberately broke the kli. And we're going to apply the principle of Ein Adam Mesu Mishalim. So that's as far as Tashlumei Nezikin is concerned. Aval Notal Va'Keleme B'Shuso Lo Zocha Ben Agan. The Chayvlach Ziron. Shafal pi shal shasa gneva eno chayv tashlumin that he shayt mischayv b'nafsho. In komakom achshav shakelum b'beis haganov she'eno mischayv b'hen. I don't know what he means by eno mischayv b'hen. I think he's saying eno mischayv misa. Because now he's in his own house. It's no longer a threat. Again, at the Shasa Gneva, he's not chayav b'tashlum, even according to Rava. He's put to tashlum because he's mischayav b'nafsho. But akshav shakelim b'beis hagana, she'eno mischayav b'hen. It's a little bit ambiguous, but I think it means there's no chiyuv b'nafsho because now he's already in his house. Heich yizka b'mamono shel zeh. I think basically Rava is raising our objection. We don't understand. Where's this kinyan? How is he kona the object? The object is alive, intact. Really, is a tzorich iyun on Rav. I mean, again, I'm sure Rav has his own, his own logic here, and we don't really know what motivates Rav here. Then he goes on and he says, Rava, Elo Kim, which is the lashon of Shvuah, I take an oath. Omar Rav, Afilu Nota. What is he saying now? So it's even though my logic is compelling, but I can swear to you that Rav actually says it. And according to Rav, the Ganem doesn't have to return the object that he stole. Afilu natal, even if the kelim is still intact. Do yesh lo domim. I don't understand. Yesh lo domim should lead us to the opposite conclusion against Rav. I see. When he says yesh lo domim, what he means is that there's such an entity as a Baba Machteres, whom you're not allowed to kill, which we'll see in the case of a father who breaks into his son's house. I think that there's a footnote here. Kigon av hanichnas Machteres lebeisa. So again, in such a case, yesh lo domim is Rav's going to have to admit that the Ganav would have to pay tashlumin, even if he broke the kelim while he was in the Machteres situation, because it's not an ein lo domim, but rather yesh lo domim. Okay, now let's get to the case where the Ganav took the kelim out, not al kelim v'nensu, and somehow the kelim fell from his hands at some point. Chai. So he can't say he's potter from tashlumin here, because until this point he was holding on to someone else's kelim, meaning the nignav's kelim, and now as a shomer, he's chayav in onset. Alma, what do we see? Bershusei kaime. It's hachinami. Bershusei kaime. So what's happening here is that Rav is doing an amazing job at trying to defend Rav. That Rav, is doing an amazing job working overtime to justify Rav, even though Rav disagrees with Rav. Okay, intellectual honesty, he wants to make sense out of Rav. And he's saying, well, what would be in a case where yesh lo domim? And then he takes the kelim out and they break for onus. So the Ganav would certainly have to pay tashlumin. He couldn't say, well, the kelim were in my possession as a pikadon, and I'm a shomer, but I'm not chayv in onsen. So all we see that stolen objects are not a pikadon, because then he wouldn't be chayv in onsen, but b'shusei kaimet. It's considered as if he, the Ganav, owns it, and therefore he has to pay its tashlumin. It's hachinami. Here too, in the case of hudar domim, right? Not the case of a son, of a father breaks into his son, but rather a regular classic case above Machteres, where it's hudar lahargo, so Rav holds b'rshusei kaime. He doesn't have to return these kelim because they're in his rishus. So why was it Bershusei Kaimi in the first case of Yeshlo Domin? I think that's the key to unlock the mystery here, what Rav is saying to justify Rav. It sounds like there's a certain element of ownership that is accrued or acquired by the Ganav, by the Bava Teres, which works against him, that he's going to have to pay for onsim, but could also work in his favor if you flip it around the other way and the object is not destroyed, it's alive and well. And we're going to say again, Bershusei Kaimei. Now, I understand Bershusei Kaimei in the negative sense, meaning that the Ganav is going to have to pay because, he because he took the kalim of so-and-so out of the rishus of so-and-so, and he took it into his own, so we can really ram it into him with a special harsh level of responsibility. But now we're taking that responsibility and we're turning it upside down and making it like a zchus for him. Instead of being a harsh imposition or obligation that we're imposing on him, now we're saying, wait a minute, he has rights over here. He has a Bershusei Kaimei. I mean, when you think about it, the Reshusei Kaimei here of Rava is the two scenarios are so radically different. I mean, in the case of Rav, meaning Rav's extension here, Reshusei Kaimei means that that even though now today he's no longer above Machteres, he's already home, but nevertheless, he clinched the Bershusei Kaimei at the moment that he was Chayav Misa, when he was in the Machteres. In the original case that Rav is comparing it to, he was never Chayav Misa to begin with. So there's a din of Bershusei Kaimei as far as a Ganav is concerned, because he took the object of so-and-so out of so-and-so's Reshus. So therefore he's like, Bershusei Kaimei, we're going to hit him with the books, and he's going to be Chayav Ba'onsim. It's not a regular Pikadon. It's Bershusei Kaimei. But now you're turning it the other way around, and you're saying that even though today there's no reason for the Bershusei Kaimei, because the whole reason for Bershusei Kaimei was because he stole the object at the moment that he was Chayav Misa, but today he's not Chayav Misa, he's out of the house, he's out of the situation of Bob Machteres, he doesn't have the status of a Rodef anymore. And now you're going to tell me, well, he can benefit from Bershusei Kaimei because he established a Bershusei Kaimei at the time that he actually picked up the object. So I guess what Rav is saying is that once it's Bershusei Kaimei, it remains Bershusei Kaimei. There was never a reversal of Bershusei Kaimei. Now, Rav asks, well, where did Rav get this Bershusei Kaimei from? He got it from the fact that if the Bav Machteres was not Ein Lo Domim, but it was Yesh Lo Domim, like the case of the father and the son, then he's Chaim and Onsim. So once we establish Bershusei Kaimei for the Chiv Onsim, we can use the Bershusei Kaimei as a P'tur and Hashava. And that's the gap, that's the jump that Rav makes, which needs a lot more analysis. I don't know, I'd like to think this over again, but again, as we leave, I just want to focus on the question, if we can sharpen the question. How does Rava make the following analogy? From one Rishusei Kaimi to another Rishusei Kaimi, just like Rishusei Kaimi works against the Ganav, in the case where he takes the object of the Nignav into his own Rishus, and now it's Rishusei Kaimi such that he's Chai owns him, and now Rava turns it inside out and makes the Rishusei Kaimi as a plus, as a schus, so to speak, working in favor of the Ganav, when the object is still intact, but it's Rishusei Kaimi. He doesn't have Tiv Hashava because at the time that he took it out of the Rishus of the Balabayas, he was Chayav Misa, and therefore that gives him the acquisition rights of Rishusei Kaimi, which are going to work in his benefit. But Rav is working with an analogy which is very, very difficult to understand. For me, I mean. Okay, then. So let me wish you a great day, and tomorrow I'll see you for Pesachim, if I got that right. Yeah?
Right, and then we have the short time for Sanhedrin.
So we have a little time for Sanhedrin.
Right, we have a little time.
Right.
Just a question. I know in the past you said you had